Hi guys, welcome back, and I say back because I assume you've been with me this whole time. So I am Steph West. I'm an LPC here in the state of Michigan. I work in West Michigan at Joe Martino Counseling, and one of my goals is to equip people with education about mental health. So I live my life at the intersection of being mental health informed, but I'm also or at least once was, a teacher and a professor, and so my goal is just to educate people about mental health. Today's information for me is one of the premier ways to understand how change happens, but it also is this piece of understanding that we all move in a similar process, but at our own pace. And so unfortunately, a lot of frustration in relationships comes from the understanding that not everybody moves at our pace. And so I'm going to give some explanation for that. Up on the board here, we have a sequence of events that happens. So pre-contemplation is this space of not really knowing that we want a change to occur. So we're just kind of going through life, not much is phasing us possibly. And then a thought occurs to us, or maybe a big life event happens that shifts our awareness. Perhaps there's a medical diagnosis. Perhaps we see someone have a success and we think, hey, I want that success too. Perhaps we come to a new understanding about ourselves. Perhaps we go through a life transition and make decisions that we want things to be different. So contemplation means I wasn't thinking about it and now I am. The very next stage is preparation. So now that I'm aware that I might want something to change, I start to think about what might that look like. And my brain starts to track through my different opportunities, my different options. I'm weighing the pros and cons, and I'm trying to accrue resources and information about what's the best way to engage the change process. Next, we go to the action stage. This is where we pull the trigger. So the gun's loaded and we go for it. And this looks a whole host of ways depending on the different overhauls that you're doing. Potentially you're doing something related to fitness. And so now you're actually at the gym engaging the workouts. Perhaps you wanted to join a particular community. So now you're actually showing up and going through whatever the new activity is. Perhaps this is a financial tweak or overhaul that you're doing. And so now you're actively storing money for whatever the new adventure is. This is where the action is actually happening and you're engaged in the pattern or the behavior that you want to be true. Now, the last one up here is maintenance. Maintenance is one of those things where you've reached goals and now you're kind of staying steady, or possibly you can terminate the goal if it's no longer important, or if you've already met whatever the objective is. Now, something to understand is we can go through this cycle again and again, and we can go through it in a whole host of life domains. So there's a lot of ways to engage this cycle, but sometimes what might happen is we go to action, maintenance, and then maybe there's something called a relapse that happens. And then what happens is we regress and we go through the sequence again if and when we decide to make changes again. So we often see this maybe with intentional eating, where we stuck to a plan, we got to the goal that we wanted, and then we kind of regressed into old patterns, and then we decide we want to engage the new behavior again. So we go through contemplation, preparation, action, and we pull the trigger again. So very common, and we go through this in a whole host of life areas, as I mentioned. But one of the things to understand is we go through it in our own way. So if I go up here, and I'm talking about pre-contemplation and contemplation, and often preparation, those are internal things that are happening for us. So if we don't communicate that we're experiencing distress, if we don't communicate that we're possibly contemplating doing something different, if we don't communicate that we're getting ready for a change, other people might be really caught off guard when we show up in the action stage and we're like, I'm doing this now, this is who I am, this is who I want to be, or however fiercely we commit to this new thing, and they're like, whoa, I'm still in pre-contemplation, I didn't even know this was a thing. So this often can actually go sideways in relational dynamics when maybe one spouse is in the action stage and he or she is like, giddy up, we need to get this done. And the other spouse is like, I didn't even know we were tracking there. I didn't know this was a thing. I didn't know there were concerns. And so what often has to happen, especially when I'm working in a relational dynamic with clients, is I would have to say to one spouse, the one who's in the action stage, what does it look like to rein in expectations a little bit and maybe slow the pace? And then I have to say to the other spouse, what would it look like to giddy up just a little bit? And maybe you need to start tracking towards understanding where spouse is, what they're talking about. Would this be advantageous for both of you to participate in? But there's going to be a kind of a middle ground that we have to meet. Otherwise, the gap often widens. When there's one spouse that's in the action stage, or maybe it's even in a friendship, and one of the friends is in the action stage and the other one's in pre-contemplation or saying like, this isn't a thing, I'm not interested, often there can be some relational distress that shows up. But I want to give a word of encouragement to anyone who's trying to make a change in their life. If you're thinking about change, you're already in the process. But you can't just think about it, you prepare. So you put together a growth plan And then behaviorally, you commit to that growth plan, and that will move you towards the goals that you want to be true about your life.